Hello everyone, Switch to here. This video will be focused on about the status of Canterlot in G5. It will be about scenarios and speculations from my end what could happen. In the G5 timeline, there are a few details that are still very much unclear for much details, like when the magic disappeared. But during the time when the magic was gone, the pony kind became separated. They all formed their own each communities. And since there was a lot of mistrust and fear against between each other, but there were also another within the brony community. What about the status of some of the well-known cities like Canterlot, Cloudsdale, and Ponyville? What about those places? Since they were only well-known. For example, what about Canterlot? Did the unicorns take over the city themselves? No. In fact, during the timeline of between G4 and G5, ever since the magic was disappeared, Canterlot actually fell into ruins. It is hard to believe that the main capital city throughout the entire history, ever since the founding of Equestria and up to the time of the ruling of Twilight, and up to G5, the main capital city fell into ruins. It is hard to believe. It is hard to believe one of the most well-known cities in Equestria's history fell into ruins. And exactly when Canterlot fell to ruins is very much unclear, but in my opinion, knowing how much the time has had passed since G4 ending and G5 beginning. I only speculate that it could have been sometimes between the past few decades to at least a century, but in my best guess, it has been at least 100 years since the G4 and the G5 timeline separated. Well, at least became that from though. So in my opinion, during that century, just the time after the magic was gone, Canterlot was completely abandoned and it fell into ruins. And it wouldn't take long for nature to reclaim a city. Or it wouldn't take long for the city to disrepair and fall apart. Within a couple of years, a city could slowly fall apart. So during that timeline, during the around 100 years, only maybe a couple of years after the magic disappeared, Canterlot fell into the ruins. But what happened exactly though? And exactly when? I'd only speculate around maybe as few years after maybe shortly after the magic was gone. And only imagine that was chaos within the Canterlot and basically all entire Equestria. Especially when the unicorns one day discovered they can't perform even a single spell, like levitation, teleportation, nothing. So there was only like a chaos. And during that time of the chaotic time, Canterlot became like abandoned. It only remains as a worst memory of the time of when the magic was abandoned, or when the magic is gone. Since the unicorns tried to figure out exactly what happened, what was caused the magic just disappeared. And ever since then, no one knows for certain. But I only say in my scenario, after the unicorn discovered the magic was gone, and they tried to figure out exactly what was the cause of it, but was unable to find the cause of why the magic was gone. And so I believe, in my guess scenario, that Canterlot was abandoned at some point after the magic was gone. And even if it will take at least a few years, that since a city will fall apart without anyone looking after it. Looking back though, since back in the founding of Equestria, ever since the foundation, the formation of Equestria as a kingdom itself, as a whole, and that they made Canterlot as the main capital, and that Canterlot served as the capital city within the kingdom of Equestria for over 1,000 years. And only at some point there in its history, its entire history, a long time, for 1,000 years, for 1,000 years, for millennia, when suddenly the magic was gone, was a main trigger for every single pony to completely abandon Canterlot. But why? Well, in my strongest scenario, one day when the unicorns just wakes up and discovered they are unable to perform even a single spell. And at first they thought maybe it was something wrong with their horn, but as the news spread the entire kingdom that no single unicorn was unable to even perform a single spell. But not only that, that the Pegasi themselves were unable to even fly. So exactly at what point when the Canterlot was abandoned, it is hard to tell exactly, but must have been during some times after the rule of the Twilight though. But only assuming from my scenario, in this case, that Canterlot were abandoned some shortly after the magic was discovered to be gone. Without the magic, ponies were really desperate. They were desperate for information, very desperate to find out exactly why the magic was gone. Like, why no unicorns were unable to perform any single spell, and why the Pegasi could even fly in an inch over the ground. There was still some amount of chaos within those early days just after the magic was gone. And since they were unable to find the solution, why? It was then the mistrust and paranoia started to be spreading among ponies. The unicorns blamed the Pegasi for all this, and Earth ponies started blaming the unicorns for maybe something about it. So at that point, right at the same time, around the same time as my best speculation and scenario in this case, Canterlot was abandoned, and every single of those once the four long-lasting alliance, the friendship between the three pony kinds was broken. For what? Mistrust and paranoia? And they didn't believe anyone of who was caused that the magic just disappeared. So, Earth ponies went on away, unicorns themselves and Pegasus for themselves. So why would they all leave Canterlot? The unicorns could still remain in Canterlot and claim it as a city of their own. But instead, they decided just abandon it. Maybe all ponies didn't want to live in Canterlot. Maybe this is the reason why. Maybe the reason why they didn't want to live there because maybe Canterlot reminded them in the past where they were all friends. And since they could even trust each other anymore, why would they live in one place that reminded them of a bad past that no longer maybe is irrelevant anymore? So I can understand why the ponies decided to just separate it and live for themselves for a long time, for maybe as 100 years. So even during that time, for a century, Canterlot fell apart. No pony has stepped their foot or hooves in Equestria's capital, or as a former capital, for over 100 years. That is what I believe why Equestria's former capital were abandoned. But since Canterlot was abandoned during the J5 timeline, But we don't even know exactly how long though. By my own best case scenario is that it has been abandoned for at least 100 years. But we really don't know exactly how much time had passed between G4 and G5. But my own personal scenario guess here is speculation. It is at least 100 years. And since during the time before the magic had been restored, Canterlot was still abandoned. No pony lived there. So when the magic had been returned to Equestria, what did that mean as a status for Canterlot and other former cities that probably also like Canterlot being abandoned? The only thing I can say for certain that is possible that Canterlot has been well known. It has still that ponies still knew about the city. And now the friendship has been restored between the pony kinds and the magic has also been restored. So it would be still unlikely that it's still more likely that the ponies would return to Canterlot and restore the city to its former glory. But as its status as a capital city though, I don't know. Maybe that Canterlot will be restored to its former glory, but being used as a capital city. I don't know though. Maybe not that it will not be as a capital city in a G5 timeline, but it will still be used as a major city. Knowing that now where the ponies are reunited and that magic had been restored, it wouldn't mean it's still not been in the end of the most well-known cities like Canterlot. But in my opinion, in one of my best case scenario, ponies from all kinds returns to Canterlot, restored it to its former glory. But even though it doesn't even make it as a capital city once again though. I don't believe even if the city is not going to be as the main capital again, there will still be a major city. But I do believe, since that when Canterlot will have been restored to its former glory, it wouldn't be as much a big surprise that other well-known cities like Cloudsdale, Ponyville, and other major cities around Equestria also being restored and also repopulated. But we don't know though. Maybe there are other cities like Maidhaven, also probably still inhabited by some ponies. But who knows? But in my strongest opinion, Canterlot will be repopulated during the time of G5 after the magic had been restored. And it's still, even though we don't know if Canterlot will regain as its capital in Equestria. But even if the Canterlot will not be as the new capital again, maybe it still be a major city. Who knows? But only time can tell about more about its future. But in my strongest best guess here, Canterlot, in the time of after the magic has been restored, the pony kinds are reunited. Canterlot will be once again inhabited by ponies and they're going to restore it to its former glory. Even if that's not going to be as the main capital, and again though. But still, even if Canterlot no longer still probably would even regain as a capital status, as a capital city, it still would have been as a major city within the new Equestria. That is about all I do believe about that though. But this is all based on my opinions about what happened to Canterlot in G5 after the magic and that ponykind has once again been reunited. But knowing how much that Canterlot fell apart into ruins during the time of the G4 and beginning of the G5, just before the magic was restored. So exactly was the main cause though. But I still believe that when the magic was gone, that it was chaos within the entire Equestria, and that ponies who lived in Canterlot didn't want to live there anymore because since they no longer trusted each other, so why would they live in a city among others since they couldn't even trust them anymore? And they did probably didn't want to be reminded about their old past. So it is ever since then that when it was a chaos and the magic was gone, that no ponies trusted each other anymore, and that was the main reason why Canterlot fell into ruins. But in the end, even after all that, I still believe that Canterlot can still be restored to its former glory by ponies that once again decide to rebuild the city once again. Even if Canterlot no longer will be the capital city of Equestria, but it still will play a major part of Equestria's rebuild as itself. Even though it will take time for a whole kingdom to be reunited as it was before. But I do really have strong hopes that Canterlot will be restored in G5 and once again to be restored to its former glory as a major city inhabited by thousands, hundreds of ponies. But that is based on my own opinion, of course. I mean, if anyone else has their own opinions, thoughts about what happened, what made Canterlot to fall into ruins, and if anyone else has their own opinions or thoughts, what will happen to Canterlot in G5 afterwards? Do you think ponies will return there to rebuild the cities to its former glory? Let me know in the comment section below. I'm really eager to know exactly what you think about this. So, this is Switch Diablo, over and out.